Every state pretty much has their own emancipation date, but Juneteenth is the one we kind of accept nationally as the day, right? So the state of Florida was one of the last states, and that would be May 20th of 1865. So what happened on that day was that Union General Edward McCook arrived in Tallahassee on May 20th, 1865, and on that day, they raised the U.S. flag over the state capitol, and at that time, he read the Emancipation Proclamation to those in the audience, and at that point, that was when we kind of assumed or accepted that that's when enslaved people, particularly in the Tallahassee area, were free. But we know it's not all just an instantaneous thing. Oh, everybody's free, snap. No, it takes one for word to travel, and then for just kind of the enforcement of it, it has to take place over time. So it didn't all happen in one day. So that's what we recognize Florida Emancipation Day. So this is the third year that we've really wanted to observe it. Welcome, come on in. And I want to thank, again, our commissioner for this district, District 2, Ms. Amanda Ballard, who has joined us this afternoon. And I would like to invite her to please come forward and read a proclamation on behalf of the Office of Governor DeSantis.
Thank you all so much for having me here today, and I'm so excited to be here and to honor the second founding of the United States of America in 160 years since this country really started the process of living up to the principles outlined in the Declaration of Independence. So I'm excited to read the proclamation from Governor DeSantis for Emancipation Day in Florida. Whereas, on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation declaring all persons held as slaves in rebellion against the United States shall be thenceforth, and forever free. And whereas, the Emancipation Proclamation is a symbol of freedom that precipitated from the founding ideas of America. And whereas, in 2022, Governor DeSantis signed HB 7, which expands instruction of African American history to develop students' understanding of the history of slavery and the ramifications of prejudice and racism. And whereas Emancipation Day is a time to celebrate freedom and to honor the contributions African Americans have made in Florida and across our great nation. Now, therefore, I, Ron DeSantis, Governor of the state of Florida, do hereby extend greetings and best wishes to all observing May 20th, 2025 as Emancipation Day in Florida, signed by Governor Ron DeSantis. Thank you.
Thank you. So May 1st, 1865, following the Civil War, Black Americans in Charleston, South Carolina, organized a large procession and ceremony. In this ceremony, they wanted to honor the Union soldiers that had died as prisoners of war in what was called the Washington Race Course and Jockey Club. So basically a race course, but it was basically transformed into a prison camp, and that's where those soldiers were held, and many of them, of course, died there. And so after the fighting was over, these former slaves wanted to honor those that had lost their lives, and so they began the process of, one, the people had to be buried elsewhere, of course, right? And then after that, they wanted to decorate their graves. So it was called Decoration Day. And so that was a parade of as many as 10,000 people, including 3,000 Black school children who were singing the Union marching song called John Brown's Body while carrying armfuls of flowers. So that was the original kind of celebration that transformed into what we now know as Memorial Day. A few years after that, there was a proclamation within the Union Army that made Memorial Day or Decoration Day kind of a national activity, but then it didn't become a federal holiday until the 70s, 71, I believe. But that's kind of the origins of it. Yeah. So we also want to recognize another person that we want to memorialize on today as well. Do we know, have we seen this woman's face before? This would be Senator Geraldine Thompson, who recently passed away early this year, and during Black History Month nonetheless. So if you don't know about her, she was really a champion of Black American history and American history, period. She was an educator and an elected official out of Central Florida, and she served in the Florida State Legislature. Okay, she is well known for preserving the historic Wells-Built Hotel, which was a place where a lot of Black entertainers, I believe, would come and stay as they traveled through. That was one of those places where they could stay. That was called the Wells-Built Hotel, and that she helped transform that into a museum where it is still preserved today. And she also worked successfully to provide compensation for those who were wrongfully incarcerated. That's one of the things that she worked on. She also had significant efforts toward commemorating the Ocoee Massacre, which took place in 1920, Election Day. And so 2020 would have been 100 years from that event. And so she worked very hard to help to memorialize that particular event. So we also want to recognize her for that. And ultimately, she served as chair of Florida's Black History Museum Task Force. Did you know that there was a Florida Museum Black History Task Force? Okay, so she served recently as the chair of that. So we want to take a moment just to recognize her and her contributions to preserving our history in this country and just everything that she did. And she passed away very suddenly, so we want to definitely take a moment to recognize her. Okay. Okay. So here's a very important part of our program, and you have in front of you a packet, which this is really the big part of the program, is to make sure that you walk away with some information that you can take home and have some dialogue with your family about, dialogue within the community about, okay? So you got quite a few things in there, right? So this kind of corresponds slightly with it, but we're gonna reference mostly the packet and we'll get away from this. But has anyone ever heard of the term ethnogenesis? Ethnogenesis, okay? So that's the process by which a group of people become a people, right? You know, if you think about it like let's talk about animals for a second. Like different species of animals, right? You have an animal that maybe comes from another kind of animal that maybe they move to another place, and then over time, their identity changes. They become a new species, a new creation, essentially, right? So that also happened with us here in the United States. So as a Black American, I want to first say this is not a race. Black is not a race in this context. We're talking about ethnicity, right? Not talking about skin color, our ethnicity, right? So the Black American ethnicity derived, or rather it emerged from various ethnic groups who came together under conditions of colonization as well as slavery. They were kind of forced together into community and they became a people. And those people came from different African tribes or ethnicities, different indigenous, from right here tribes, as well as even European ethnic groups who amalgamated together and we became one people that's known as Black Americans. So if you go down in your own family history, you may find all kind of different things in your background that actually pulls together to make you who you are, right? So that's what Black American ethnogenesis refers to. So I want to let you know that there is a big effort going on in our country today to recognize this ethnic group as a people, right? So if you may not be aware, when you fill out your forms that says like race on it and it has like white, African American / Black, etc., right? So African American, has anybody ever used that term to describe yourself? African American, okay? So that really is a term that our government recognizes as a race. So it doesn't necessarily just refer to us from America, someone who's from, like, say, Haiti or Jamaica, anywhere in the Caribbean or Africa continent, anywhere in the world, honestly, who may be Black or melanated or et cetera, will come to the United States and they will become an African American. Legally, that's officially, right? Question?
Yeah, I got a question about
Yes.
Spent time in the military, had a conversation with some folks, had a Caucasian guy say to me, hey, I'm more African American than all of you. I'm like, well, yeah. I said, what? He said, well, he was born in South Africa, a native of South Africa, moved, became an American citizen. So technically, if you look at stuff, he's an African American.
Right.
So I don't like to use that term because anybody can be an African American. I would like to use the term more like what's more distinct. Like I know a lot of people don't like it, but I like Negro because a Negro can only be a Negro and nobody else can be a Negro except a Negro.
Yeah. You're right.
African American, you start getting it because when he said that, I got kind of offended. I was okay with it because I understood where he was coming from.
Exactly.
So that's why I personally do not like to use the term African American. I would much rather use black or Negro because that does specifically say that this, and nobody else can go and take that away and say, oh, I'm a Negro now. It's your DNA test. Other than I'm from South Africa and now I'm African American and you're African American. So both of us are the same. That's just my point.
Exactly. Now, you brought it up so perfectly, exactly what we're talking about today. Exactly. So, yes, so African American is one of those terms, as well as black also, because our government says that black and African American are synonymous. So if you're black, it means that you are any person having origins in any of the black racial groups of Africa. That's what that means, officially, according to the government, right? But we're saying, people like me and other people who I work with across the country, we're saying, no, we're actually our own ethnic group, and because we have such a unique history in this country, we need to be actually identified. You can't just lump us into a nebulous category that doesn't really have a clear definition. We need to be recognized and have our numbers actually known and have our real statistics known. We want to know all that information, right? Because otherwise, we can never solve our problems. How can we address our problems if we don't even know, how many of us what percentage of our community is homeless? What percentage is has a high school graduation diploma or higher? We don't have any of that information because it's all lumped together with anyone who may come to this country from anywhere in the world and become an African American. It's a bit problematic, in my opinion. So in that packet there, what you have, this page right here, it looks like this. This is from the Federal Register notice. So a couple of years ago, what's called the Federal Office of Management and Budget, they had a process to revise what they call SPD 15, that's Statistical Policy Directive 15. And that is how they define the race and ethnicity standards in the country, right? So there are many of us who are advocating for us to have our own, or have our data disaggregated, or to have our own category where we can have information about our community that doesn't get lumped in with other groups, because other groups have different challenges, different histories, different community challenges in their own right? So we want to know how everybody individually, has challenges. So like if the Haitian American community has certain things that they're experiencing, that's maybe different than someone who is a Black American, who has a different legacy in the country, right? So we want to make sure that is identified. So you can see here their response and their summary of the public input that they got, and you'll see some of the terms that people advocated for to be known as. Of course, Black American is there. American Negro was another one. American descendant of slavery. Indigenous Black American. Foundational Black American. These are all terms that people were interested in being considered as. American freedman, another term. So these are all different terms that people were wanting to be known as, but we are pretty much firm across the board that we did not want to be African American, because it's like I said, it captures so many into that umbrella, and is not very specific. I'll give you a very clear example about that. So we talk about our college, or rather our high school graduation rates, right? So less than 25% of Black people in this country who are age 25 or older have a bachelor's degree or higher. Less than 25%, right? So that means 75% of us have a high school diploma or less, right? So let's consider that the Nigerian American community, according to the Migrant Policy Institute, has a diploma rate of like 54% or something like that. So if you have numbers like that and you lump them into this number, so the 24%, is that really 24%? Is it less? What if it's 10%? What if 10% of our community has a high school diploma? The problem is a lot bigger, right? So we want to be able to get to those problems and identify them. So that's why we have this here. So we want to go back to the second page in your packet, which talks about genealogy and tracing family history, okay? Has anybody made an attempt to trace your family lineage? I see a few hands up. Yeah. Yeah, so exactly. So really it's just tracing it's not a DNA test. It's not 23andMe. Okay? It's tracing your family by parents and who's their parents and who's their parents and who's their parents and who's their parents. That's how you get there. Okay? So that's something that I do. I take a lot of pride and pleasure in doing that. And I also want to encourage really any American, but particularly Black Americans, to really look into and find out who you actually are, because a lot of times we're told that we're a lost people, we don't have a culture, we don't have an identity, we're just lost people in America. No, technically, we're actually ethnically American. Because I said, our ethnic group was created here, right? It wasn't created in Africa, it was created here. Because we're a combination of the indigenous that was here, the Africans, the Europeans, et cetera, and in different combinations. Your family might look different than my family history. You might have more of this, more of that. It all depends. So that's why we want to trace our family history. Very important. And this whole line of my family is in Sumter County, Alabama. It's very important. I grew up going to Sumter County. My grandmother was born and raised there. So we have a very long history in Sumter County, Alabama. So Wilson Dawson's parents, James Dawson, born 1821, Rosetta Dawson, born 1820. And then on Charlotte's side, we have her father, Granville Bennett, born 1824, and Martha born 1826. So I want to talk a little bit about Granville Bennett for a moment. So I discovered information about him through FamilySearch.org, which is what this website is here. It's a great place to start. It's free just to get started. It really helps if you have even the most basic information, it will kind of start to populate it for you and fill things right in for you. So Granville Bennett, what I learned about him, which my family did not have much information about him. My grandmother, she didn't know anything about him really. And I found through Family Search information about a book, which is called this book right here. This book is called Freedom's Lawmakers by Eric Foner. This is a directory of Black office holders during Reconstruction, right? So my genealogy search led me to this book, and I found Granville Bennett in this book. So let me tell you what it said here about Granville Bennett.
Where did you say you got that book from?
It was referenced on Family Search, so when I bought it, and Granville Bennett, it says, born 1823 or 24, Alabama, Black, illiterate, farmer, native of Alabama, represented Sumter County in Alabama House of Representatives, 1872 to 1876. It says he owned $125 in real estate according to the 1870 census. So that's what I learned about my mother's father's father. That's what I learned about him. And so I was able to take it even further than this, shockingly. And I discovered that, of course, I learned that he served in the Alabama State Legislature for that period of time during Reconstruction. Did you know about Reconstruction? Do you know about that? So that was that period of time after slavery where all of a sudden we had these constitutional amendments that were signed, the 13th, 14th, 15th, and we had all these Black people who at that time, Black men who were being able to vote. And so they really took advantage of that opportunity and they voted and they were elected into lots of offices, both local, state, even federally were elected. So that was we have not seen, I think, that level of engagement until really the 70s probably, between that time and then the 70s, of 1970s. So it's really, really interesting history. And so what I found about him was that he, among many others, was interviewed by a congressional committee. So there was a committee that came to investigate what was going on in all of what they called the late insurrectionary states. So that means any state that was in the Confederacy, they were looking at kind of what's the status of things going on there, et cetera. And so he was actually interviewed by that committee. And I was able to find the actual transcript of the interview. So I can see him in 13 pages of his own words talking about things that he experienced, things that he saw and witnessed. And it's really powerful to be able to do that. Yeah, so. I also want to take a moment as well just to acknowledge who we have in the room. Of course, you know, our Commissioner Amanda Ballard and her family took the time to be here with us today, so we appreciate you being here. Thank you. We want to thank our Manatee County Democratic Black Caucus for being here. Thank you. And we also want to shout out our local NAACP branch right here, which I want to invite. Yes. Which I want to invite. So I also am the first vice president of the branch, and I also want to invite Mr. Leo Scott, who's our membership chair, if he will come and say a word about membership. Thank you.
But to say this, I grew up in Jim Crow laws. None of you all know about that. I can tiptoe now and touch 80. So I was back there. And what she talked about was very important. But I do have something that I need to talk about too, but I can't do it today.
Okay.
And that's the Jim Crow laws. We speak of freedom, we have freedom. We had freedom after Jim Crow. When you hear my story, you understand why I said that. But if you want to sign up for the NAACP, come on over. I'll sign you up.
Thank you. Thank you.
You said you want to hear about the Jim Crow. Where would you prepare to tell us about it, or how can we get you to?
Well, what I'm doing now, I started a Paul Matter Shady Grove project. Anyone know about Shady Grove?
I know the name, but that's it.
Anyone know about Shady Grove? No? Shady Grove was doing the Jim Crow laws here, about 2 blocks from here. That's where I was born and grew up at. That's Shady Grove. It don't exist anymore. So I got a project going on we call Shady Grove, and I built a community. You can look at it and see where you live. Community, miniature community I built, and we're going to write a book. We're going to write a book about Shady Grove. Shady Grove was a good time. You may not believe it or not, but they were. We had fun. Not only that, I was in the NAACP. We did sit-in, did walk-ins. We went to the beach, protest. We protest movie theaters. We had sit-ins right here in Manatee County. We did. So I go way back, and I got a lot that I need to tell you. And we need to really move because things are going to change quickly. I've already been in Jim Crow. I know what it is. I know how it is. And when I finish my project, Mandy, you'll be able to see it. And I already recruiting members who live out there. And believe it or not, there's a lot of people who live in Shady Grove. Okay? But I'll let you know.
Thank you. And that's very important what he just said. And I also want to reinforce, so when we talk about this genealogy stuff and documenting family history, that's really not just for people who are passed on, that's for now. We want to hear from our elders, from our seniors who have had many life experiences. We want to document those experiences so we can, be able to share those stories with those who are coming behind us, right? So that's something that I am very committed to. On another note, I am the chairman of the Manatee County Historical Commission, and I also just wanted to mention that because I do care very deeply about the local history here, and I also want to, again, the oral history is a component of that. So it's very important for us to hear from our elders, just across the board, even if you're black or otherwise, really, to understand the history of that time period and what it was, right? So thank you for that. So if there's no other questions, again, I want to thank you so very much for taking the time out of your day to join us this afternoon. This is the 3rd year we've done this. Look forward to improving it again for next time. But again, thank you so much for being here. Hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.